Welcome back. I am the Observer. The night is late. The world outside is fading, like a city unplugged. Only this room remains, filled with a silence deep enough for you to hear your own thoughts. Now dim the lights, find your warmest corner, relax your shoulders. Because tonight, we are opening a file on the plant that has caused the most tragedy for humanity since civilization began. It is not a thorny, terrifying poison, but a flower. Imagine a barren wasteland, and right in the middle, a flower blooming, petals as thin as silk, crimson red, cold white, deep purple like the very end of a sunset. It sways in the wind, arrogant and harmless, so beautiful that you just want to reach out and touch it. But that beauty is a trap, because deep within its stem lies a milky white sap. Just slash the pod gently, and the sap bleeds out like tears. Leave it overnight, and it changes color. It darkens, it thickens, it turns bitter. And when it enters the human body, it does something that nothing else in the ancient world could do. It extinguishes pain. It lulls you to sleep. It makes you forget. It pulls you out of reality and places you in a soft, floating void, as if all suffering were someone else's story. And that is exactly when the curse begins. Because what makes you comfortable once will make your body remember. What eases your pain today might make you unable to live without it tomorrow. It doesn't kill you immediately. It gives you pleasure, then turns that pleasure into a need. From a single drop of sap, it becomes a commodity. Goods turn into money, money into power, power into war, and war redraws the map of the world in blood and smoke. Tonight, we answer one question. How did the sap of a wildflower ignite brutal wars between superpowers? And how did the gift of God turn into the curse of the devil? Take a deep breath, because right now, we are going back to the dawn of human civilization, to the land where humans first called this plant by a name that sounds both sweet and haunting, the plant of joy. Mesopotamia. Between two great rivers, fertile soil, hot sun, dry wind, the place where humans learned to sow seeds, build walls, and carve words onto clay to trap memories in brick. But there was one thing they could never carve away, never control: pain. A rotten tooth could turn a strong man into a ghost of himself. A small cut could get infected and drag a whole family into a funeral. A severe stomachache was enough to make people kneel, not out of religion, but out of helplessness. In those times, pain wasn't just a feeling. Pain was a reminder that you were very easy to kill, and death didn't need a big reason. Amid that rough, abrasive world, humans found something suspiciously gentle. On ancient clay tablets, they mentioned a special plant, a name interpreted as sweet and bright, the plant of joy. Humans named it after the feeling, and the feeling it brought them was joy. When the flower fades, it leaves behind a round pod. Slash the pod, white sap oozes out, cloudy as milk. Leave it overnight, it darkens, thickens, becomes bitter. And when it enters the human body, it performs what was, in ancient times, almost a miracle. It induces sleep, it reduces pain, it soothes fear. Put yourself in that time. You are in pain, and you don't know if you'll be alive tomorrow. Suddenly, there is something that takes the pain right now. What would you call it? Medicine or a gift from the gods? In the ancient world, the line between medicine and faith was as thin as onion skin. The healer was also the one who prayed. The pharmacist was also the one who cast spells. Therefore, that bitter sap wasn't just in the village healer's pocket. It could be found in temple storerooms, in rituals to soothe the soul, in those nights when people feared the dark and needed something to make the fear go away. The scary part is, back then, no one thought they were playing with the devil. They thought they were receiving a gift. But secrets never stay still. It traveled with merchant caravans. It followed wars. It walked with wandering healers. From Mesopotamia, the story of the bitter sap drifted through Assyria, Babylon, then down to Egypt, where people began to record medicine on papyrus like a book of life and death. From Egypt, it continued to Greece. The Greeks did a very Greek thing. They named it,
and they put it into mythology. They linked the image of the poppy to hypnos, sleep, and thanatos, death. Two brothers, two doors. One door is soft, one is eternal. Use it right, you sleep. Use too much, you never wake up. A beautiful and spine-chilling metaphor. By the time it reached Rome, things became more practical. The empire of roads and armies also had things that softened it. Disease, pressure, insomnia, chronic pain after war. The poppy was brewed, drunk, and used as part of the medical inventory. And because it was mostly taken orally, the effect came slower, softer. The demon, if it existed, had not yet bared its fangs. It was still sleeping peacefully in the cup, in the medicine jar. But history always has a twist. The twist happened when the substance left the hands of the healer and entered the hands of the merchant, when it was no longer just a lifeline, but became merchandise, when humans no longer used it to survive the day, but used it to escape reality. And then, opium left the Mediterranean, traveling east on trade routes as long and fragile as silk threads. There, it would meet a small but fateful change. Not drinking anymore, but a different way, faster, stronger. And that is when the demon truly awoke.
Chapter 3. The Silk Road and the Moment of Smoke. You think the Silk Road carried only silk? No. It carried spices, gems, paper, glass, gold, slaves, stories, and secrets. The desert night, cold as stone. The day, hot as a lashing fire. Caravans dragging their shadows across the sand. Camels stepping slowly, their bells ringing, a dry, hollow sound. In the leather pouches hanging from the saddles, there were things no one asked about too closely. Opium traveled that way, unobtrusive, just a dark resin wrapped tight, hidden away, traded for silver, for food, for a way to survive. And then it reached China. In those early centuries, opium didn't crash into life like a starving beast. It entered through the door of medicine. In an empire that loved to record and systematize, it was categorized as a rare, expensive, precious medicinal ingredient, meaning only those with money, power, or connections could touch it. Officials used it for aches and insomnia. Physicians used it as a last resort when a patient was writhing in agony. Sometimes scholars or monks sought it out, not for fun, but to silence the body, to sit stiller in meditation. But then, history played a cruel joke. An ancient addictive substance from the East met a brand new addictive substance from the West. Tobacco from the Americas traveled everywhere, to Asia, to China. And with tobacco came a new habit, smoking. It sounds simple, but that simplicity is exactly what made it terrifying. Because smoking is different from drinking. It's direct, no detours. It doesn't ask permission from the stomach. It doesn't wait for the liver to filter it. It rushes into the body like an intruder. And when humans had a pipe, a spark of fire, and a need for instant relief, what had to come, came. At first, it was just mixing a little opium into the tobacco, a way to upgrade the sensation. But the human brain is very honest. It doesn't care about morality. It only cares about what feels better. The comfort came fast, making everything else taste bland. Then people started removing the tobacco, bit by bit, just as humans tell themselves they are in control, until they realized the thing controlling them was no longer them. In the big cities, smoking opium became a chic trend, not just a cure for pain, but an experience, a slow, elaborate ritual, like drinking tea, but behind it was a hook. Lying down, the weak yellow light of an oil lamp, the smell, sweet, cloying, mixed with bitterness, the smoke slithering into the chest, reality receding just a little. You don't just smoke, you fall out of reality, you hide for a while, and then you want to hide some more. Why is smoke more dangerous? Because whatever comes fast, hooks you fast. When the effect is slow, the body has time to negotiate. It receives the signal slowly, it can still think, but when it hits fast, the brain is ambushed. And once the brain learns the shortcut, humans start to hate the long road. That is when the gift starts to have a price. The price isn't money, the price is habit. Habit becomes dependence, dependence becomes life. You think you are using it, but actually, it is using you to replicate itself. At first, it was a game for the rich, but supply follows demand. As demand rose, sources increased, prices dropped, and when prices dropped, it belonged to everyone. From the private chambers of the wealthy, the smoke crept into the back alleys. From a luxury, it became a necessity. Society cracked, health declined, spirit declined,
Productivity declined. People looked at life through a layer of dirty fog. But that was not yet the biggest disaster. The biggest disaster was across the ocean, an empire smelling the scent of money. When China acquired a new habit, the commercial world saw a new opportunity. Maritime empires didn't care about your health or culture. They only cared about profit. If a nation is dependent on a product, they will buy it forever. And buying forever means silver flowing forever. And from this point on, opium was no longer a matter of healers, for rituals, or for private rooms. It began to be a matter of global trade. In the next chapter, we will meet a country addicted to tea, a country addicted to silver, and a company powerful enough to turn free trade into an excuse for war. Opium had found its smoke, and when it found the smoke, the devil truly awakened.
Chapter 4. The Tea Empire, White Silver, and the Companies That Sold Curses. On the other side of the world, amidst the 18th century smog of London, the British were addicted to something else. Not opium, but tea. A hot cup in the morning, one at noon, one in the afternoon, one before bed. People poured tea like they were pouring stability into heads spinning from the Industrial Revolution, from factories, coal smoke, and a life that roared by without letting them breathe. And where did the tea come from? China. But there was a problem. The Chinese didn't need anything the British brought. Wool, they had their own fabrics. Metalware, they had their own craftsmen. Clocks? Interesting, perhaps, but not something the Celestial Empire craved. So when the British wanted to buy tea, silk, and porcelain, they were allowed to pay with only one thing: white silver. Imagine it, shining crates of silver flowing out of Europe, crossing the oceans, docking in Canton, and then vanishing into the Qing dynasty's treasuries. The British ships returned with hulls full of tea, while the national treasury started to bleed out like a torn pocket. An empire can win many battles, but it cannot defeat the economic ledger. In rooms smelling of ink and leather, men stared at the numbers and panicked. Trade deficit. The British needed something to balance the flow of silver, something the Chinese would buy steadily, buy forever. And if they didn't want to buy it, the British would find a way to make them. And then, like a joke from the devil, the answer was already in their hands. India, their greatest colony, a reservoir of resources, and most importantly, a place where poppies could be grown on a scale China had never seen. In Bengal and beyond, fields of poppies bloomed like a festival of colors. But don't let the beauty deceive you. Beneath those petals was the coldest machine of the empire, monopoly. The British East India Company was not just a company. It was a monster with its own army, its own ships, its own laws, and a bottomless appetite. It organized the planting, the buying, the processing, then packed it into cakes and crates. Each crate was like a bullet aimed straight at the heart of the vast Chinese empire. The opium was auctioned in India to private merchants. These men carried it to the waters near China, anchored offshore, and smuggled it inland through a network of middlemen, bribes, and the closed eyes of local officials. A river of black resin flowed in, and a river of white silver flowed out. From a rare medicine in a cabinet, opium became a basic necessity, and so Chinese society began to fall ill. The Qing dynasty saw it, of course, but they were no longer facing a few scattered smugglers. They were facing a commercial system armored by cannons on the sea. And in London, men in vests, sitting in leather chairs, sipping Chinese tea, began to speak of something that sounded very moral: free trade. It sounds noble, but their freedom meant, I want to sell this and you have no right to refuse, even if that thing was killing you from the inside out. Chapter 5. The Campaign to Eradicate Opium. The Qing dynasty could no longer pretend. Silver was draining from the treasury. Addicts were everywhere. The army was weakening. An empire was rotting from the inside out. Emperor Daguang chose a man strong enough to hold the knife: Lin Zexu. An incorruptible, iron-willed official, Lin was dispatched to Canton, the only gateway for Western trade. At that time, Canton had two faces. By day, it was tea, silk, and luxury goods, but by night, it was small boats, flickering lanterns, and opium traded for white silver. Lin Zexu arrived like a thunderclap. Immediately, he blockaded the foreign trade factories. He cut off their food. He cut off their water. He blocked every midnight path. No negotiations, no bribes. It was a siege that left those accustomed to using money to open doors staring at a door that had slammed shut. Finally, they were forced to surrender the poison. Thousands of crates of opium were confiscated. And at Human, Lin Zexu did something that would later be called the spark of war, the destruction. He didn't just burn it, he dug massive pits, channeled seawater into them, dumped the opium in, and added quicklime. The mixture boiled and churned, turning into a murky, toxic soup. For days and nights, crates were smashed, black resin flowed out, and the tide swept it away. To China, this was a righteous act to save a nation on the brink of collapse. But in London, the cold, calculating minds of the empire saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They crafted a familiar narrative, barbarian arrogance, interference with free trade. They draped a cloak of morality over the shoulders of greed. And then, out in the mist of the coast, the shadows of warships appeared. The most advanced killing machines of that era were brought to China's shores. The Qing dynasty, with its bureaucratic, feudal, and outdated machinery, was about to face the most terrifying maritime empire the world had ever known. Chapter 6. The First Opium War. Off the coast of China, the mist parts. Emerging from the fog, Western warships appear, not with a roar, but with a coldness, like an overdue bill finally being collected. The Qing dynasty still fought the old way, high walls, stone forts, wooden junks, and massed infantry, but the British brought something entirely alien to them. Iron, steam power, rifles, long-range cannons. War was no longer a clash of courage, it was a calculation of firepower. The British easily crushed the vast Chinese empire. Their firepower was worlds apart from the outdated feudal armies of the Qing. Coastal fortresses were pounded into dust, war junks splintered like rotten wood. The British didn't need to conquer the whole country. They only needed to squeeze the right places, the ports, the trade routes, the gateways of wealth. In 1842, the Qing dynasty was forced to sign the Treaty of Nanking. The terms were brutal: pay millions in silver reparations, open trade ports to the British, and cede the island of Hong Kong to be used as a base. The pain was not just about the loss of money or land. The real pain was that, from now on, China no longer had the right to say no. Lin Zexu, the man who smashed the poison, was cast aside and exiled. Meanwhile, China entered an era where everyone felt an invisible hand slowly choking the nation. But greed never knows the meaning of enough. Even as the first war ended, the shadow of the second was already falling. It would be more brutal, more devastating, and it would end with a fire that swallowed an entire palace. Chapter 7. Yuan Ming Yuan, the Fire of Civilization. The Treaty of Nanking was not enough for the British. They wanted more. They wanted deeper access to the interior, an embassy in Beijing, and, the most shameless demand of all, they wanted the Qing court to legalize the very substance that was killing its people. They needed an excuse, and an excuse always appears when someone wants it to. A seized ship, a few heated arguments, and that was enough. This time, the British brought the French, two empires, one gaze fixed on the Oriental cake. The Qing army was still outdated, still disorganized, and it shattered just as quickly as before. Beijing was threatened, the emperor fled. And then, tragedy struck the very heart of the empire, Yuan Ming Yuan, the Summer Palace. It was more than a palace, it was an entire world of gardens, lakes, paintings, porcelain, and ancient scrolls. It was the vault where thousands of years of Chinese history and culture were stored. But Western power had no interest in such things. The palace was looted, then it was torched. The fire fed on precious wood, on libraries, on heritage that could never be restored. For 3 days and 3 nights, a piece of human history turned into ash. The Qing court rushed to beg for peace. The Treaty of Tianjin was drafted, expanding the unequal terms of Nanking. The result? Opium trade was legalized, more ports were opened, foreigners were granted the freedom to reside and proselytize, more territory like Kowloon was ceded. It marked the profound, agonizing weakening of China. China began to live in a long, lingering state of humiliation, and in that thick fog of despair,
Opium was no longer just the addiction of a few individuals. It became the symbol of a draining empire, merely counting the days until its total collapse. In the next chapter, we leave the battlefield behind. We will explore an even more terrifying version of opium, when science refined the black resin and gave birth to children far more powerful than the original curse. Chapter 8. Morphine. As science progressed, humanity craved something more compact, something cleaner. The laboratories did what they do best. They isolated the most potent essence of the flower. And so morphine appeared. White, pure, cold. Morphine could do everything opium did, but with a speed and intensity many times greater. It extinguished pain. In the wars of the 19th century, morphine was canonized as a saint. Field hospitals, amputations, blood, mud, and the rhythmic groans of soldiers. A single injection of morphine brought silence. The pain didn't vanish, it was merely lulled into a temporary sleep. But that silence had a price. When the wars ended, many returned home with an invisible wound. It wasn't on their skin, but in their souls. Their bodies remembered the bliss that morphine brought. And when life struck them again, with debt, nightmares, and emptiness, they knew exactly what could pull them out. Then came the hypodermic needle, and everything got worse. Drinking was a long road. The body had time to break. Smoking was faster, but the dose was limited. But the needle? It went straight. No detours, no permission asked. If opium was a drifting cloud of smoke, then morphine plus the needle was a door kicked down in the nervous system. The curse had evolved from flower to crystal to needle. Faster, stronger, and harder to escape. Chapter 9. Heroin. The sweet promise and the slap of history. When morphine began to cause dependency, the world didn't stop in fear. It rushed to fix it. And then heroin appeared, to the applause of progress. A name that sounded like a hero, an advertisement that sounded like salvation. Stronger, cleaner, and, according to the experts of the time, less addictive. Does that sound familiar? History is more addicted to that lie than humans are to the drug itself. The reality was different. The thing that makes you fly the fastest usually makes you fall the hardest. No devil required. The human body is honest, and the brain loves a reward. Suddenly, society jolted awake. The press condemned it. Rehab centers sprouted everywhere. Governments began to act, passing strict laws and bans. But prohibition doesn't erase demand. It only changes the stage. From tea tables to dark alleys, from medicine to merchandise, from a public habit to a whispered secret. And once something crawls into the shadows, it becomes filthier and more ruthless. The cycle was complete. Pain needs relief. Relief becomes dependency. Dependency leads to prohibition. Prohibition creates the black market, and the black market gives birth to criminal empires. In the end, people blame the flower. But the flower only blooms. It only gives its sap. It doesn't sign contracts. It doesn't open smuggling routes. And it doesn't station cannons offshore. The terrifying part lies within us. Greed turns medicine into a commodity. Power turns commodities into war. And weakness turns humans into monsters. The night is deep. If you are still listening, remember one thing. The line between a miracle cure and a deadly poison is as thin as smoke. And sometimes the thing that binds you tightest isn't a rope, but a feeling of comfort you once tasted. I am the observer. If the journey we have taken together tonight has resonated with you, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so we may continue our journeys in the chapters to come.